No hidden blade, no brotherhood, no actual assassins. Instead, we got a massive open world, RPG mechanics, and a stronger push toward myth and fantasy. Odyssey is the most divisive Assassin's Creed game ever. But here's the thing, it's not a bad game. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a massive, ambitious RPG with some of the best open world gameplay in the series. But is that really a good thing? Last time we broke down how Assassin's Creed Origins changed the series forever. But if Origins was a reinvention, Odyssey was a full-blown transformation. So what did Odyssey get right and where did it completely go wrong? Assassin's Creed was built on stealth and parkour, but in Odyssey both were heavily downgraded. The hidden blade was completely removed and replaced by the spear of Leonidas. While it was a cool weapon, it completely changed the feel of assassinations. Instead of precise clean kills, everything revolved around RPG stats. A higher level enemy could survive a full assassination attempt, making stealth unreliable unless you are fully committed to a specific build. And that's the thing, stealth in Odyssey wasn't about strategy, it was about min-maxing stats. You had to optimize your gear, stack assassin damage, and use the right abilities just to make stealth viable. If you didn't, you were forced into open combat whether you wanted to or not. Social stealth was still missing, and for some reason Cassandra couldn't even hide in haystacks. On top of that, new abilities allowed her to literally turn invisible, making stealth feel more like a magic trick than a tactical choice. Parkour suffered even more. Odyssey reused Origin's traversal system without any meaningful change, but Greece's world design made it even worse. Unlike past AC cities like Venice, Paris, or Constantinople, Odyssey's world was mostly wide roads, scattered villages, and open fields. There were barely any rooftops to chain together, no reason to stay above ground, and worst of all, no fall damage. Any risk and reward aspect of parkour was completely erased. At this point, stealth was unreliable and parkour was irrelevant. And if those things didn't matter, how much of Assassin's Creed was really left? Odyssey improved the combat system over Origins. It was faster, smoother, and had more depth. Spartan kicks, Isu powers, powerful finishers, there was more variety than ever before. But the trade-off, it is fully committed to being an RPG. Combat was no longer about precise calculated strikes, it was about min-maxing stats, leveling up gear, stacking buffs, and fighting damage sponge enemies. Instead of using strategy to outmaneuver opponents, fights were often determined by numbers. If your stats weren't high enough, no amount of skill could save you. And that's where Odyssey truly lost its Assassin's Creed feel. Yes, you could go full warrior, full hunter, or full assassin with your builds, and the level of variety was fantastic, but it also meant that combat was less about skill and more about having the right stats. A strong build could completely change your playstyle, but it also highlighted how much the game revolved around grinding and optimization rather than raw player skill. The loot system made this worse. Odyssey showered you with weapons and armor, but they all felt meaningless. Duplicate gear with slightly different stat made progression feel like an endless grind instead of an organic journey. Level gating was also worse than ever. You'd be forced to stop the story just to grind side content because enemies would instantly overpower you if you were underleveled. In some instances, it was even worse than Origins. This game allowed players to create the build they wanted at the cost of tight game design and immersion. Odyssey expanded exploration in interesting new ways. Instead of following waypoints, you could search for clues to find objectives, making the world feel more alive. While the core structure remained the same as in Origins, this small change added immersion and made exploration feel more rewarding. And one major return was the sailing. The Adrestia wasn't on the level of Black Flag's naval gameplay, but it was a welcome feature. Acting as a mobile home, it gave players freedom, recruiting crew members, upgrading the ship, and traveling across the massive Greek world. Naval combat was simple but effective, a fun distraction even if it never felt as integral to the experience as it did in Black Flag. But what kept the world alive long term was the endless gameplay loop of war and mercenary ranks. The conflict between Athens and Sparta was always shifting, letting you take part in large-scale battles. While they were fun, they had no real impact on the story, reinforcing Odyssey's focus on repeatable content over a structured narrative. And then there was a mercenary system, a dynamic ranking ladder where players could be hunted by stronger mercenaries or climb the ranks themselves. It added an unpredictable emergent gameplay layer, rewarding players with loot and perks. Between the war system, mercenary hunts, and randomized loot, Odyssey ensured players always had something to do, but also turned progression into an endless grind rather than a meaningful journey. That brings us to the mythology problem. This game pushed Assassin's Creed into full-blown fantasy. Fighting Medusa, the Minotaur, and literal gods felt more like a mythological RPG than an Assassin's Creed game. Cassandra wasn't just a warrior, she was a demigod, capable of surviving falls from any height, wielding overpowered Isu abilities, and taking on monsters straight out of legend. To be fair, the game tried to justify the mythology through the Isu, and the Fate of Atlantis DLC expanded the lore in some of the best ways the series has ever seen up to this point. But even with that explanation, Odyssey leaned too far into fantasy. When your assassin-like protagonist is fighting Cyclops and teleporting across the battlefield, it's hard to say this still feels like Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed was once known for strong narratives and immersive storytelling. Odyssey went full RPG, but instead of improving on past standards, it surprisingly regressed. For the first time, players could shape the story with choices, adding variety to the narrative, but at the cost of cinematic direction. While Odyssey had a handful of fully motion-captured high-quality cutscenes, the vast majority of the dialogues felt stiff and robotic. And with so much bloat and level gating, most of the game's interactions felt generic rather than meaningful. Even the main story arcs were bloated with fetch quests and unnecessary detours. Instead of a tight, focused plot, Odyssey constantly ping-ponged you between NPCs before giving you the actual objective. This dragged the pacing down significantly, making it easy to lose track of the main plot. The dual protagonist system was a mistake. Unlike Syndicate, where Jacob and Evie had distinct personalities, Cassandra and Alexios were just reskinned versions of each other. Cassandra was the canon lead, but the choice felt completely pointless. And the biggest issue was the lack of assassins in the story. Instead of playing as an assassin or even a hidden one, you were just a mercenary fighting the cult of Cosmos during the Peloponnesian War. The cult was meant to be a hit list of important targets similar to the Order of the Ancients. But in reality, most of them were just generic enemies with no weight. Instead of cinematic assassinations, the majority of them felt like random NPCs thrown into a checklist with little impact on the story. Even worse, the Hidden Blade wasn't even in the main game. The only real connection to Assassin lore came from the Legacy of the First Blade DLC, which introduced the first Hidden Blade in history but locked it behind a paywall. And instead of letting you play as Darius, a proto-assassin, you were forced to stick with Cassandra without even being able to use the Hidden Blade yourself. The DLC's story was weak and its handling of Assassin lore was even weaker. However, Odyssey's story wasn't bad. It had great moments featuring historical figures like Socrates and Herodotus, as well as legendary landmarks and myths that helped bring ancient Greece to life. Even the modern-day plot felt like it was finally finding some direction, but in the end, the game prioritized quantity over quality, filling the world with detached side content, excessive fetch quests, and overstuffed plotlines. And that significantly hurt the pacing, immersion, and overall narrative. There's no denying it, Odyssey is an amazing RPG. The world is massive, the combat is fluid, and the player's freedom is unmatched in the series. But was it a good Assassin's Creed game? Not even close. RPG mechanics completely took over. Grinding, randomized loot, and level gating turned progression into a chore. Core AC mechanics were extremely watered down. Stealth was unreliable, parkour was irrelevant, and the assassins didn't even exist. It became a full-blown fantasy adventure. Mythological boss fights and superhuman abilities erased the grounded feeling of the series. At its core, Odyssey is an RPG first, Assassin's Creed second, and for many fans, that wasn't just a problem, it was a breaking point. So now it's up to you. Was Odyssey a worthy evolution of the series or just a fun RPG wearing the AC logo? Let's settle this in the comments.